let's resume. We've already made a kind of transition from the last session to this one. We've got an hour and 6 minutes to solve all available problems. And we had a question. We had 2 questions. So why don't we have those questions right now? Can we get a mic? Okay, great. And just, this irritates people when I say it, but it has its uses. Not a lot of people know that a question is a short interrogative statement followed by a question mark. Just thought I'd throw that out.
Okay, so the first question is, how much have you got in the tank left? How longer can you last universities or the University of Belgrade? And the second question is, don't you need at some point some of the elites to switch sides?
Yeah, we don't know how much we can last because under this situation, the ruling party has majority in the parliament, so they can change the rules, they can change the laws, they can do whatever they want. They can stop the salaries, they can stop the universities, they can make whatever they want. So according to that, that's not a question of us. We will fight for the academic freedom as much as we can, and we will not stop it. So that's for sure. But it's not up to us to see how is it going to be. The support from the other people and to switch other people to our side, it's also the question, because there are many of them who are now silent and who are not giving the voice for different reasons. Some of them are afraid, some of them are in some business connections with the authorities, some of them are employed according to some corruption movements and things like that. So there are many people who are somehow blackmailed and they don't have let's say the aspiration to switch. So now it's in this next period of time, I think it's the very difficult time for some people to switch on let's say our side, on the right side, because most of the people are doing like this. Okay, you are very good, just go ahead, do it, but they are sitting in the cafe and watching from the TV and saying yes, go ahead, don't stop, and things like that. So that's not what the student movement needs, that kind of support. And I think that more people should take some actions in the future, because it's the matter of the whole society. It's not just the matter of the students. But I think that according to what was happening in the last year, and according to the big protests, a couple of them which were held in Belgrade, in Novi Sad, where, according to some accusations, in Belgrade, for example, 500,000 people were in the protest in March. So I think that it's difficult for those people to change the side. On the other hand, even though they are not active, I think that the majority of the population in Serbia are now willing and in favor of changes, on one way or another. But I think that majority is. Now it's the question how to articulate this majority into the regulation of the elections, and how to got it smoothly in the next year.
I wonder whether anybody else at this table has a further thought about this. It's really about elite decomposition. It's really about the moment at which the Vukic elite begins to switch sides, stop patting you on the back and actually pass you secret information, that kind of thing. I mean, the analogy with Hungary is rather interesting because, in fact, the beginning of the opposition was an example of elite decomposition. Peter Magyar comes from the inside of the Orbán elite. He was married to the Minister of Justice and then broke. And so that's a very interesting and significant development because it's encouraged other people to go. But the difficulty that I think you're alluding to is that in regimes where corruption is a structural feature, it's a feature, not a bug, as they say, and where the economic fortunes of a whole middle class are tied into state contracts and state and political compliance. Orbán famously said to a banker friend that I know, "I have a lot of mouths to feed," right? This is how you do it. And so decomposition is not just a choice of political loyalty, it's taking a risk with your economic future. I'm just wondering whether anybody has some thoughts about elite decomposition in Serbia. Anja, yeah.
So I have a kind of reflection, but also I think this is really tightly connected to like everything we've been discussing. So from the perspective of the fact that we're looking at youth movements and student movements, I think it's kind of very interesting that we're only now getting to inequalities. I think that for young people, especially economic inequality, is one of the primary things that motivates how student movements are shaped, how they function, what kind of discourses they're creating. And that what we're talking about, most of the discussion is kind of the language they've created that is not political in the way we would like it to be, how we understand politics, and it's not fitting our imaginaries. So when we speak often about would elites help the movement, I don't think they would necessarily, because the language that they speak is often very tied into the dominant language of politics as created within the regime and talks directly to it. So I think that would actually make the movement lose its power, and especially the language they're creating that emphasizes different values, that emphasizes solidarity, would not be as powerful like if it was integrated within the established structures. I think this was kind of connected to what Hedvig mentioned previously. It's the passivity, being passive. I think it's also a form of micro-resistance. For young people that don't have economic resources, that cannot move out, being passive, being non-political, when you're told you're not political for 20 years by every opinion pool, it's also taking a political stance. And I think the politics that's being created doesn't necessarily fit all of our conceptual frameworks. And that often what we're seeing right now when we're saying that there are two different kind of agendas, one fits the politics, the other doesn't, and then there are no results that are being named. Like, this is what we like to see because we're so used to thinking about politics being framed within institutions that exist. And what I see when I talk to friends in Serbia, or like I listen to what students are saying when I'm following discussions on social media, is that they're deeply dissatisfied with existing institutions, political structures that are, established. And that if you want to imagine a different future, often if you're very dissatisfied with what exists, you cannot imagine it within the established system. So what's emphasized is we need to move away from the dominant elites. We cannot engage with them. I think this is also what you see in the way they structure the lists, discuss, or like how they make opinions. It's like moving away from what is not going to fit who we are or who we imagine ourselves to be.
I'll be with you in a minute. Just want to follow up on that for just a second, because what you say is extremely interesting and important, and it captures a vision of a political vision in very important ways. But it might be that if you want to help the elite decompose, you want your opposition to fracture and come apart and come over. That's the worst possible ideological line to take. That is, it's right morally. I'm not, I get it. Then discuss with the elite, discuss with their corruption, discuss with everything. But if you want to break them apart, you've got to send them a more welcoming message than that, right? Or not welcoming, but just a kind of, we get it. We don't like you, but we need you in the future, right? Something like that. But that's not what you're saying to me, right?
I mean, like, I feel a little bit conflicted to say a lot about the Serbian context because I'm not directly from Serbia, but I've been observing a lot of youth movements in the region. And I mean, I come from Slovenia, and in Slovenia, and we see representatives when they take place, you know, when they take a very permanent role, when they're young activists being called elite and established into a new elite, and then what power political they have when they're starting to negotiate, when they're starting to talk to other people who are considered to be elite, is diminished completely. So I don't, like, I think at the current stage, this is not a true possibility. I think political process that is taking place is structured a little bit differently, and that interaction with, you know, whatever, I mean, we didn't define what elite was, like political or economic, or like what type are we specifically talking about, because also university professors can be considered elite in many ways and forms. I mean...
University professor, definitely, and don't trust the university professor. Sanja, you were going to come in there.
Thanks a lot, and thank you very much, Ida, because you actually provided me the slight shift from the streets into what we are here about talking, and we are talking about academia and the state of the arts in academia in general, because this is what made, in the first place, students act and react maybe to organized and act and react to what is going on and what is happening. And when I think of it, I think who will actually think, research, teach in 20, 25 years from now, if this is what is going on, and how all of this is happening epistemologically, and then always politically. But let's start from the beginning. Why are we here for? As academics, most of us, we were engaged in educational processes, not only at high level, high education, but at any in elementary school and up to the universities. So what we are doing, and now thank you, Hedvig, and thank you for all of those who recognized our intention. What we are doing in the region is that we are providing funding for early career scholars. And what does that mean? It's for those who are precarious, out of jobs, and scared about the academic market at the moment. So when they are self-organized before they finalize their degrees, it's so much welcomed. And it's not a coincidence that actually our call for fellowships, junior fellowships this year is the youth agency. So we are on this spot, working on agency, but not specifically agency, whatever agency, it's youth agency, it's generational otherwise, and then it's also working on imaginaries, and not lending or borrowing or providing imaginaries on behalf of the other or on behalf of the youth. So one thing is there, and at the same time, what I carefully followed what we were discussing and what we did. We started with the movement, But then we shifted very clearly into a political articulation how that movement should get into the procrast's bed, like how we are going to fit it into something that we imagine as politics, or doing politics, or executing democracy, or deliberating, or whatsoever. So there is also on the side, and that's self-critique, there is also on the side of the academia this the blind spot that we are not ready to what is arriving. The event. There is a French thing, especially with Badiou and others. The event is something that is coming, and you don't know what is it, but you need to be ready. So how to be ready for it is, we were talking about trust, and Filip was saying about trust, and then also Vladan was talking about trust. This is it, but trust in what? In the other person, very difficult affair. It's always challenging to trust the other. But firstly, trust your own capacities and your own possibility of acting upon events, or not reacting, but being able to stand alone and then go with it, not with the flow, but then try to articulate on your way. I don't know, Maria or Galen, you're also in the field and about revolutions, how revolutions are prepared. Is any revolution really cooked in some specific place, or it was also the thing of emerging not only imaginaries, but energies that will bring us understand. That's the reaction, but then European fault, and then that's the fault line. What is it? And again, is related to the fact that as academia, we are not having self-confidence in trusting that something that is coming after us is also potential and powerful, that can bring change. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Sanja and I had this conversation yesterday, and I'd rather talk about revolution, and I'd rather talk about the EU, but I think there's a point to be made. I think there's a point to be made here. The lessons from Croatia and anti-war activism in the 1990s. One of the reasons why Croatian higher education is in the mess that it is because the best and brightest of a generation never finished their first degrees. They ended up working in anti-war activism. They ended up leaving the country. And so what we've had, with exceptions, and we know who those exceptions are, what we've had are technocratic, opportunistic, and nationalist elites who have been running our universities. So I just want to make a plea that it is so important that this generation of students, because to be rescued by your programs, they still need to do a PhD. So that it's so important that these people who are a living laboratory of action are able to run universities in the future, because you know what? I think they'll run it in a way that is better than we did, because they won't have this view of universities as elite institutions completely separate from communities, from social movements, from trade unions, from ordinary people. Now, it might sound romantic, but I think, if you lose that generation, you're going to pay for it for the next 30 years.
I'm delighted I've got a traffic problem here, because I want to encourage all of it. I saw Hedvig first, and then Filip, and then Helena. So, Hedvig first.
Thank you. Well, I believe that, this is now of course, what's happening with the student protest in Serbia, this can be kind of analyzed as a phenomenon for itself. And it's, as I, in my first intervention, said, I really admire it. I think it's kind of really important that it gets documented. We are actually working on it. My colleague Milan is here. We are doing a documentary film really about the phenomenon, to document, to analyze, to save it for the future, to have it as an example how things can be done and what's the magic in this, what's going on. But I also try to be a bit provocative here. It's just the fact that it's really wonderful that it came in the moment where no one expected, in the moment where it's very much needed. It doesn't mean that it will actually result with the outcomes we wish for. And I mean, even if it's kind of really innovative and they don't want to have anything to do with political parties, they don't want to have anything to do with organized civil society, they don't want to kind of get their hands dirty in that sense, that's beautiful. But if the majority of the Serbian population can really stand behind something like this, you know, to approach this unknown, what Sanja was saying, I'm not sure. You know, even though there is a deep unsatisfaction, I go back again to the issue of deep clientelism. You know, it's like your question about how to kind of destruct the elites. I mean, this is not what I see. Of course, there are many people we know, and we are in our own bubbles, and we think that the majority thinks a certain way. But I still don't believe that it's the case. If there would be elections tomorrow, that really on the polls, people would dare to vote for something which is really the unknown. Because of the many, also Filip mentioned, you know, many of the practicalities which there is realpolitik. There are things which need to come, these guys need to deal with. And I would just reflect shortly about your question on the international support. That is, again, a major issue. And if we compare it to the previous, I was part of the student protests against Milosevic, etc. That's a completely different world. The entire Western world was against Milosevic. So this was not an isolated Serbian internal process. Everyone wanted to get rid of Milosevic, so there were different ways of how to make it possible. And then there is a lack of kind of strategy within the EU, and it's of course understandable, because what can the EU do? The EU cannot interfere in internal politics by, you know, throwing down governments. You know, it's impossible. So we can be unhappy with how it goes, but on the other hand, it's also understandable. So it's a very, very tricky issue, and then not to mention all the other things which are going on in the world. So that's why Serbia is not in the focus. And the final thing, because you are kind of comparing the situation to Hungary. Or at least there is a kind of populist regime in here, and there are movements in Hungary and there are movements in Serbia, but I think that there is nothing similar between the two. You know, there is a political opponent who comes from their basically circles, who manage to mobilize society because of, again, a deep unsatisfaction, but and that makes it completely different from what we, and maybe there is even a larger civic support because it's genuine, because it comes from the students, and maybe a positive outcome is even more likely in Serbia than in Hungary. We don't know that, but I don't think that we cannot really compare them.
Well, that will be the last time I bring up Hungary. In the interest of clarity, I take your point, Hedvig. Helena. Yeah.
I had the impression oftentimes at this table that we discuss the old dilemma of whether the actor is more powerful than the structure, or is the structure more powerful than the actor, and I think that we maybe overemphasize the power of actor, and that is the student movement, and we tend to forget the importance of the structure of the Serbian society. We need to understand it, and also the way how the actor is implicated in the structure, being the product of the structure, and, you know, we have to understand, if we want to really imagine what are the possibilities of this actor to succeed, we need to understand what the structure is. And I don't think that with the question of elites, whether the student movement will be able to topple down or dismantle the elite, and whether it really shies away from the concept of the elites, I think that we need to fully understand all the complexities here. So there's one part of thinking among the student movement is this desire to reset everything, to reset the system. But this is in contradiction with the very student list. Okay, so student list is composed of people who are, most of them are 40, 50 plus, and they are elites, like professional elites, university professors, etc. So they're not students among them. So you do not really reset the system with people who are basically elite, and also this other condition, you know, those who are on the list are not supposed to be, they had to be politically pure, so never engaged. So basically that means all those who kept silent during the last 12 years, right? So those who are activists, they're not allowed on the list, but those who are silent. So there are some implications just to introduce the moment of criticism, because it's healthy. I think it's healthy to also have a critical look onto it. And, you know, okay, what would be the future of this new government, for example? So the student movement and the student demand is for all the opposition parties to refrain from the elections. And we have student lists, and the polls are showing the student list is stronger than Vučić, the coalition, which is true, but not strong enough to have a government on its own, right? Not too strong enough to have, so you would end up with majority of seats, for instance, student list representatives, maybe. You would certainly have at least 30% of Vučić's party. You would have no opposition. And how can you guarantee that those who are on student list would not form another party, go to us? You have no, I mean, there is no such a thing. They cannot pledge their, what, you know, to swear, to have an oath or whatever. So and those are people people on the list who have their careers, you do not expect them to just follow the line of the student movement, which will also transform and move. And so this is why I think that we need to have this pragmatic and realistic outlook without diminishing the importance of what is going on, but just to understand the structure within which this whole process is taking place, and to realistically look at this. And then I think that we really need to, if we are concerned with the democratic future of Serbia, we need to work towards a unified front against Vučić, and we have to implicate external actors into this. And this is where the talk about the EU comes into play. I think it's very important to have external actors, and we need to to kind of at least agree that toppling this regime is it's a precondition for discussions about resetting the system and everything, because I think it's very, very damaging to have this insistence of resetting the regime without really knowing whether this regime will last for another 5 years or whatever, because we will all be gone by then.
Filip?
I wanted to go back to the question of elite composition and elite defections. The first problem is that we don't have a common approach to this phenomenon of elite defection, whether it is to be encouraged or no. And one of the reasons for that is lessons of history. So in 2000, we had a peaceful change of regime because there were people in the security sector who negotiated with the government, part of the security sector negotiated with the future president, Koštunica, which all allowed for the peaceful transition of power, but then later on proved to be an obstacle in, thorough democratization of the country, because this created certain kind of reserved domains and parts of the deep state which remained intact. So students knowing this, and all of us knowing this, we are very careful to encourage defections because we are all afraid that we might step into the same river again. So that's the first problem. Then whether this is happening, I don't see this happening right now among the loyalists, so this is the hardcore supporters of the regime, but we do see pockets of resistance in certain institutions. And I would particularly like to stress and emphasize the role of the public prosecutor for organized crime, who for many years was not doing his job properly. So some cases were in the drawer, some cases were conducted in cahoots with the regime, but we didn't really consider this institution to be independent part of the judiciary. But all of a sudden, maybe a year ago, this institution, for some reasons that we can discuss, started doing their job properly, and they started investigating high corruption regarding the General Staff building, which just yesterday Kushner's company decided to give up because of the investigation of the public prosecutor. So major success. And B, everything which has to do with the so-called Sky communication cracked by Belgian and French police, and also high corruption with regards to the fall of the canopy. And we see that now the regime started going after the public prosecutor, and they want to, in all sorts of ways, stifle the resistance. So I think if there is any elite decomposition and defection, it is to be probably found within the state apparatus. And hopefully, after the election is rigged in 2026 or 2027, it's going to be a huge challenge for police and for other institutions, whether they will follow the line of the regime and continue with the crackdown of the civil society and the student list, or they will maybe defect and simply follow the law. So I think this is the key threat, I think, for the regime, from the inside the institutions to face resistance and some kind of more, let's say, strong fight for democracy and rule of law.
Ivan.
I'd like to go back to the beginning of the demands of the students. Now, you'll excuse the political, philosophical background here, but there's the political and politics. There's le politique and la politique. And I think the demands of the students were very political, namely the key demand for the regime to reveal all the documents related to the collapse of the canopy, financial, engineering, legal. The key contractor is a huge Chinese company. The main subcontractor is a Hungarian company. And of course, the devil is in the details of the subcontractors who are all linked to the regime people. And that is where the crime happened, and the key immediate slogan was corruption kills. Of course, I won't go into all the details of how they lied, and that Vučić said the canopy had never been part of the reconstruction, only to be told the next morning by an engineer who said, of course, it was part of the canopy of the reconstruction. And the fact that all these companies were deeply involved in actually siphoning off money. And because this demand persisted and the regime constantly kept saying, but we've published all the documents, only for a few days later to be revealed that they didn't, they said, oh, but we forgot about this. And so there are thousands of pages. And for those of you who are not following, there was an expert commission, or rather 3 that were set up by the university experts, the Faculty of Law, Faculty of Economics, and of Engineering, who came out with an extensive report showing the extent of the corruption and its links to the president as well, that reveal all this. And then, as the rector rightly said, there has been a learning curve also, and the students have recognized certain things that they should have done differently. So there is an adaptation to the movement and to what's being organized. In fact, on the 28th of December, the intention is to gather signatures for early elections. The students realize this is more symbolic because, of course, Vučić, even if 1 million people signed it, he won't call early elections. But it's to show the will to change that I think is important. The other thing is, we said about what are they actually up to. Well, yes, they're doing policy papers in all domains of societal life, and they're also preparing controllers for polling stations. I think it's important to understand what actually Misha mentioned, the protests against the lithium mine in the Jadar Valley, which basically I think is a non-starter. I mean, there'll probably be huge legal issues. Rio Tinto, the international company that is mining, will probably demand billions of money for what they've invested over the past 20 years in actually exploring the mine. And then, as Filip just said, the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, officially said, because I respect Serbia and the Serbian people, I will not make this huge hotel in the center of Belgrade on the ruins of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff building, which is, of course, had this been before the student protests, maybe Vučić and the regime could have shoved this down our throat. I mean, you know, because there wasn't resistance, because of the clientelism that we rightly point out. And of course, Vučić is a very smart politician. He's done handouts constantly to pensioners, to young people before summer holidays, etc. So he's buying indulgences domestically, and we must say internationally. I mean, by selling huge amounts of artillery shells via third countries to Ukraine, about $2 billion worth, by going to Odessa himself, by meeting Zelensky frequently, by sending the Speaker of our Parliament 3 weeks ago to Kiev to meet Zelensky, and Yermak, who's not, of course, anymore in office. And his wife was sent to Kiev 3 or 4 times over these past 2-3 years. So he knows how to play the system. That game of sitting on 4 or how many chairs is sort of falling apart because nobody really believes in what he's saying anymore. And let's not forget the indulgence he's bought in France. I mean, we, Serbia, are supposedly buying 12 French fighter jets. The French company Vinci has a concession on Belgrade Airport, not only on Gatwick and many other airports, but on Belgrade Airport. France is supposedly building Belgrade Metro, which we hope to see one day. And there's a promise of buying a French nuclear power plant. So you can imagine that France is very happy to support a quote-unquote stable president who is in office at least for another year. So he thinks he's, well, up until very recently, satisfied the internationals by saying, better the devil that we know, Alexander Vučić, than who knows who these students are. I mean, I think what's also important to note is that the turn of the famous EU tanker began somewhere in April when Marta Kos, the enlargement commissioner, came out very publicly on Slovenian N1 television and said, first sentence, the demands of the students are the demands of the European Union. I mean, it could not have been clearer than that. It took the other institutions, European Parliament, that came out with a very strong statement and a list of boxes to tick if Serbia wanted to go forward. Ursula von der Leyen came to Belgrade a month ago and did not say for the first time, dear Alexander, everything is wonderful in Serbia, but she said, dear Mr. President, there's issues with your electoral law, with your media, et cetera, et cetera. So it has changed, and I think that he feels the heat from all sides now on this. So talking about, you know, where is the international approach to this? And from what we gather on the sanctions put on the Serbian oil company, NIS, it seems that Trump is not happy with him either. And the fact that Vučić tried to buy an indulgence by selling him this prime location property for a Trump tower, that has also petered out. So I think it's important to look at the situation that we're talking about also from that international foreign policy security aspect as well.
We need to explore this international, I mean, Ivan's point seems to me very important, which is to analyze clear-sightedly the ways in which Vučić believes he's locked down France, he's locked down the European powers who want a show of support for Zelensky and done that with the ammunition, locking down Trump until recently, then it begins to wobble. So then the question is, what do the students do here? What does the popular movement do to secure international visibility? If you're leaderless, and deliberately so for excellent reasons that we've been analyzing, how do you begin to get the so-called international community to pay attention? And then a second question just behind that is, how much does that matter? I mean, as an international person who spent a lot of time in the Balkans in the 90s, one of the pathologies of the Balkans was if we could get the attention of the international community in this way or that way, it would make a difference. And basically, everybody was betrayed by the international community in the 90s with very few exceptions. So there was this kind of idea that external agents had more agency than internal agents, but actually the internal agents turned out to be determinative in every case. And so that might be a thought here, that nobody's, I mean, to put it brutally, say, nobody outside Serbia gives a damn, actually. And so the effort of students, for example, to build that sport might be a waste of time. That's meant to be a provocative hypothesis as opposed to a statement of fact. I mean, I don't know. Anybody want to go in on that?
Look, I mean, everyone will think I'm crazy, right? But I want to say something about movement and bicycles, all right? Because I actually think that the bicicliada, the idea that groups of students have kind of, on bicycles, traveled huge distances, right? So across the region, but also to Brussels, I think to Strasbourg, and then being met by similar groups of students who actually are offering solidarity, but it's a solidarity that exactly challenges these notions of elite conversations. So the idea of hundreds of bicycles supported along a very long route, joined by other students on bicycles, precisely strikes me as the movement metaphor becoming real. And, you know, what that has done, I think, has meant that there's a lot more consciousness among students in other European cities, certainly more understanding across the post-Yugoslav space, and those networks of solidarity actually could continue. Now, I mean, I can't remember who it was who mentioned. There are students in exile. You know, there are students who, because they don't have the right passport, are now living somewhere else, but still studying in Serbia, right? So where am I going with this? Just bear with me for one more sentence. These bicycle networks of solidarity, a new diaspora of students who cannot study in the place where they wanted to study, is actually building new forms of solidarity that actually old understandings of social movements can't really grasp.
Just to add to that, because the thread is there already woven by accident, or not really by accident because it's a structural thing, but the representative of the European Student Union in Brussels is actually one of our students from Rijeka, University of Rijeka, Lana Par, who she was a deputy director of the student union, and then became herself the head of the institution. And why it's structural? Because it's something that in Rijeka we very much groomed through years. Not only in having student obedience and this career path. She's a microbiologist, but then found out that actually she knows how to speak, to address audiences, and to defend the values that are not only that are political and democratic values. And so she was in Brussels when various student representatives, some of them on bicycles, but some of them flying to Brussels in special business classes. They came to Brussels, and then it was on student union, European Student Union, to recognize whom they're talking to, because there were so many of them coming from Serbia, and with different discourses, with same discourses that they are students' representatives. And then it was on those in Brussels to relieve that smoking screen and find out what is the issue, whom they're talking to. And Lana was supposed to come to Belgrade, to Novi Sad, actually, for the anniversary canopy. And the campaign that was run, because she was recognized as a danger, the campaign that were against her was so brutal that she and others around her decided for her physical security that it's better not to show up in Novi Sad. This is the
It was
level
about her
of
national
danger.
identity
Yeah.
as a
And
Croatian.
Lana Par is a Croat. So whenever there is a possibility, you just ignite the spark with the nationalist or ethnic or Semitic, anti-Semitic, whatsoever, gender, of course, not forget that, but it's always recipients that are always there when there need to be a dispute. Thank you.
Are these, then the question is whether these, it's a double question, whether this kind of transnational mobilization is strong enough to become a political factor in how this plays out. And the other side, whether all this anti-Semitic, crude nationalism, hostility to students as a spoiled elite, I'm trying to remember all the cards that we've discussed being played, whether those cards are strong enough to turn this. How this involves a very complicated calculation about Serbian opinion. But Ivan was going to go next.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think several people have said there's, on the part of the regime, a systematic campaign through the media, through speeches of people to sow confusion. You know, it's the Russians trying to do this, it's Western, it's NGOs. Now, because they have been warned, the EU ambassador to Belgrade just yesterday came out and very publicly said, stop talking, bad-mouthing the EU. In the morning you say you are strategically oriented towards the EU, you fly to Brussels, you cross your heart that we're doing everything that should be done, you come back, and then we've had 2 or 3 people from high in the regime, just one said the other day that maybe joining BRICS is better than joining the EU. Then we have this rather uncouth character called Alexander Vulin, who said that we should have a referendum on the Serbian world, you know, akin to the Russian world. while, you know, parts of the regime are saying, no, we're going to. So it's this confusion which is systematic in spinning. So poor people, you know, when people say, well, in Serbia, public opinion, only 35% want to join the EU. Well, of course, because they are being told from the top that there's something wrong. I mean, some of you have heard me say this many times. If we had a referendum on Europe, I'm sure there would be a majority because common sense in the end prevails. But that's exactly what the regime is up to sow this confusion. And Croatia was mentioned rightly because in the beginning it's Croatia who was trying to bring down the regime using the Croatian, whatever it's called, the kitchen, sort of playbook of how you actually go about this. As I said in the horrific little video about Filip, it was Croatia who was really behind all this. And so you can imagine it's this is a free advertisement to go back to Michael's book, Blood and Belonging, where all of this 30 years ago was very patently explained. But yeah, Blood and Belonging comes back all the time, where as some people very simply say, we're still fighting the wars, not only of the 90s, but back of World War II and God knows where. And that yeah. I didn't want to go back that far. So it's, but I think that shows the weakness of the regime, frankly, that they don't know how to, what is the messaging? So they're all over the place, I mean, literally. And I think there's a see-through in this, and the see-through has been realized in Brussels as well. So they're putting on their gloves slowly. It's not that they're stopping cooperation or anything. You know, von der Leyen said, you know, we're there for you. If Russia cuts off gas, we'll help you, you know, with all this. So there's a game of push and pull until, and Hedvig is absolutely right, we don't know where this will end. I mean, some of us are hopeful that it will begin to change. And yes, it will be very messy politics if the students get student list gets 40%, Vučić gets 30%, and the combination of opposition gets whatever's left, 15%. So there'll be very complicated kind of coalition negotiations and talks. So we'll go through shades of dark gray before we get to lighter gray. There's no, as we know, angelic figure in politics.
Hedvig was next, and then Helena.
Yes, well, going back to what Ivan was saying about the about now reactions from the EU, we can be unhappy by the level of the international support. However, we also have to admit that it is now for the very first time that there is some understanding outside that things are not going well in Serbia. And as Ivan said, Vučić was considered as the one with whom they can do business based on their interests. And also, to be fair, you know, there was really no alternative because the opposition is completely destroyed. So I think we should really give the students the credit. So I don't think it was a kind of a lost energy or investment cycling through Europe or walking or you know, doing whatever they are doing. It's very successful. On the other hand, also it was mentioned this solidarity in the region, which is shown, which is a completely new momentum again in the regional dynamics. I mean, unfortunately, we can witness a very kind of heavy decline in regional and bilateral relations. It's much worse than it was 10 years ago. And again, the students who are now accused of being nationalistic, managed actually to mobilize this regional solidarity at a completely different level and in a different way than how we imagine cross-border and regional cooperation and reconciliation and all this thing what we are doing since 2 decades. So going back again to what Ivan was saying, you know, it is an unknown. And of course, we can be hopeful, but I mean, maybe just to challenge a bit more the discussion and going back to this idea of considering now this movement as part of this Gen Z movement, which we can witness in many places in the world. And as I said earlier, you know, really the situation in Serbia was ripe for something to come, and now it's there. However, what if a movement like in Nepal came, and probably results would be already there? You know, it's like, that's my point, that this is a beautiful, peaceful movement with all kinds of remarkable elements. And I'm not the one who wants to have violence on the streets. I'm just saying that there are different examples which are maybe more successful. And this one is really demanding to come to the results because of all these also political and other issues which might be then coming at us later on.
We're 10 minutes to the end, and I want to send a signal to the audience that we will have time for a question or two from this very patient and attentive crowd. Helena was next, and
I was just thinking how we are all skillfully avoiding your question regarding external, internal, because you asked in a provocative manner whether external support is really that important or whether internal actors are those who are decisive. And instead of giving an answer, I want to add another provocative idea that maybe we cannot talk in terms of dichotomy, internal, external actors in such a way, because in the Balkans we don't really have sovereign states in sense that you have bounded political entities that have internal actors acting independently from external actors. We simply don't have that. So not only that Vučić government and his regime very much is depending on what Ivan described, French Rafales, German interests in Rio Tinto. They are constitutive to his government. So there would have not been Vučić government had these interests not existed. So I think it's not just that he is building these alliances; they are intricately intertwined with his regime. And I think that and that goes for all these Balkan countries, unfortunately. So it's not a matter of ideological position. So it's not a matter of whether I want to see more sovereignist actors. No, it's just accepting things as they are. And in that sense, I think that we need to talk in the same, in the same package, we need to think about change, internal actors and external support. We cannot disassociate them as independent entities.
Just two very quick points. I mean, I think, you know, those of us who are critical researchers need to think more about like corporate watch, China watch, Russia watch, EU watch, and understand exactly what Jelena said, that the borders between internal and external actors no longer exist, right? So that actually understanding, you know, Eagle Hills, the role of Eagle Hills across the world is really important for anyone who wants to understand the democratic deficit now to kind of look at and think through. The second is the question of violence, because because clearly one of Vučić's strategic provocations is the idea that there will be violence. And the moment there is violence, he can then use first that mob who were basically in the center of Belgrade, but then the security forces and the riot police and even the army. So although, you know, the lessons are clearly there that nonviolent protests often don't achieve, and it's only when there's a kind of armed rebellion, I don't think that's the scenario in which we are now. I think, you know, we don't know how this will end, but actually thinking through what Vučić's options might be from a kind of political strategy kind of idea might be worth thinking. And maybe part of this is about kind of undermining those links with international corporations, transnational corporations.
okay, we are coming. Oh, Oh, sorry.
Quickly to
Philip,
respond
yes,
to...
and then if, I want to make sure that I get something in from the audience if they have a question. Sorry.
Just to respond to your provocation, whether it is a waste of time to garner international support or no. I don't think it's a waste of time, and I think we are here facing, in a couple of months, maybe a year, a situation in which the regime will try to rig another elections, and the question, the huge dilemma for the international community will be whether to, turn a blind eye and accept or even clap for the victory, or to withdraw the support and endorsement and to go, Maduro way in Venezuela. So it is going to be a very practical question for the European community and European Union and international actors, whether they will continue engaging with a regime which obviously lacks democratic legitimacy. And if there is a clear signal from them that they will not tolerate it, I think the price for them to conduct such elections will be higher, and maybe their calculation will be different. So I think it's extremely important. This is not the piece of the puzzle which can solve the domestic situation, but it can be this missing link at the crucial moment in a year's time, which will basically, direct the situation in one direction or another.
Yes, we've got another election in the United States in 2026, and there's a legitimate question as to whether the EU will make a declaration that the election is not regular. That's political science fiction that could come to a cinema near you next. I think we've reached a point where I can ask whether there are any questions from the audience. There being, there's one. Okay, let's have a question from the audience.
Thank you. I'm learning a lot, and this is probably a naive question, but it touches upon this international context and support that you were talking about. Is there any sociological research about where the student movement stands on the EU accession? Is it broadly pro-European, or does it reflect the divisions in Serbian society? And there is also a Eurosceptic wing there.
Well, they are still not, let's say, they still didn't make the final opinion about that. So it's a little bit diverse in the student movement. So there are many of them who are in favor of European Union. There are many of them who are not. All of them are in favor of European values, and that's what they are saying. And European values is one of the sentences, part of the sentence which is in the first article of our constitution, that our constitution, that our society is going according to the European values. And this is made in the constitution in 2006 in our country. And they are fighting for this. They, in many panels, in many discussions, in many TV shows, they are saying that they are in favor of European values, but they at the same time say that they are not in favor of the European Union. And it's a little bit tricky. I remember on one panel in Albach when we were talking with the student, there was one of the students from your faculty who was in that panel, and he spoke something like that, and then somebody from the audience asked him, so I don't understand, what do you want? So you are not in favor of European Union, but you want support from European Union, which is the right question, I mean.
Ivan?
A quick rejoinder to that. One of the reasons why there were no European flags is exactly this, what we call stableocratic approach. Namely, Vučić is the leader. He's doing all these things that I mentioned for Ukraine, for France, etc. And these leaders would come literally over the past 2 years and address our president and say, "Dear Alexander, everything is fine in Serbia." That is why there is this, I would say, temporary skepticism to the EU. Wait a minute, you're supporting a spin dictator? What about democracy? Or when this lithium memorandum of understanding was signed a year and a half or 2 years ago, I can't remember now, when Chancellor Scholz came, he had in tag the director of Mercedes, of battery factory, of Maroš Šefčovič, the deputy commissioner of the commission, and they said, wonderful lithium. And then people in Serbia who were already against lithium, really there was an uproar, there was a big demonstration in Belgrade. I don't know how many thousands of people were there. They said, wait a minute, you're willing to dig lithium and you're not saying anything about the lack of media freedom, the lack of electoral rules, the lack of oversight. And so there was a real uproar, so much so that Franziska Brandner, who was head of the Green Party in Germany at that time and who was a state secretary, had to give about 6 interviews in the month that followed to say, no, 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 don't worry, we're not trading your democracy for lithium. We'll see to it that conditions are met. That is the reason why there was this thing. And again, students in their infinite wisdom and will for purity said, and I think this is key to understand, we need to change our country by ourselves. And, you know, if anybody wants to help, great, but we understand from all the bad sort of experiences that we've had, no, this is, we have to roll our sleeves. However difficult it is, we have to do it. And just one thing that I wanted to say, sort of more, if I can put it, structural, sociological. These regimes, at least where we live, have a shelf life. Milosevic lasted for 12 years, and then we got rid of him. Vučić has been in power for 13 years now. Yeah, we can tolerate corruption, we can turn a blind eye, we can take the handout. I'm a pensioner in Serbia. I'm happy when Vučić gives a handout to pensioners because they get a little bigger pension, right? But there's a limit to this, right? And then the tragedy in Novi Sad was just the trigger of the pent-up frustration of living in a system like this where you have to be a member of the party to get anything. One of the many egregious example was parents couldn't put their kids into kindergarten in a small town near Belgrade because they were not members of the ruling party. I mean, that's how far it went. And so I think the shelf life is reaching an end here.
We got one question here, and that will probably, unless I see another hand, be the last one, because we'll have to stop.
Sociological polls, maybe I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's important.
Yep.
To my knowledge, there was a research conducted by professors Slobodan Marković and Miloš Bešić. They actually interviewed and polled students active in the blockades. And according to their poll, students active in the blockade, so those who are on a daily basis, at the faculties, in plenums, etc., were more pro-European than the average Serbian. I mean, in the average population, 40% of the people support the EU. So I don't know the exact number, but it was way more pro-European among the students, not like 100%, but much more than in the average population. Then that's one research. Then we conducted different polls. For instance, my faculty participates in a consortium. We did poll of the entire nation, and our poll proved that 40% of the people support the EU. But when we cross-tabulate the people who support the EU and the people who support the students at the average level, national level, we see that the difference in pro-European attitudes among those who support the students is not that big from the people who support the regime. Yes, on average, maybe 45% of people who support students also support the European Union. But you also have 35% of the regime supporters who support the EU. So, to cut the long story short, among the activists, pro-European sentiment, especially when it comes to European values, is much stronger, but in the general population, it's not so clear-cut.
Question here.
So the question about intergenerational communication. So, I mean, from New York City, Mandani got elected, and one of the storylines was that young people were able to convince their parents to vote for Mandani. So, what would you say? Is that an avenue where they can walk up the ages and enroll their parents to join their cause?
I think it's going on. Yeah, it's not only parents but grandparents as well. But also parallel with that path, which is I think the higher, is the path where there are many, let's say, conflicts into the families because of the situation. Some youngers are not talking anymore with the older part of the family because of that, and there are also some clashes which are caused of this political situation. But I think that majority are trying to somehow get the willingness from the older ones to support them.
I think we've come to the end of, I don't know about you, but I found this fascinating, useful, extremely valuable, and I think we owe a great deal of gratitude to this panel, and I thought the exchange among the panelists was very fruitful. My takeaway, oddly, and it's nobody else's takeaway necessarily, is I was fascinated by the notion of purification. When I think about movements for change that I've witnessed in my life, and they include Charter 77 in Czechoslovakia, when it includes South Africa, it includes some other places I can think of. What's interesting about the desire to purify society is simultaneously a rejection of the existing language in which politics has been conducted, an attempt to find another language. I'm going to do it again, Hedvig, you're going to forgive me, but in Hungary, what is interesting, the language spoken by Magyar is a language of purification. It's a language of moral renewal. Now, we can then be cynical as we want to be and should be about that, but he's deliberately taken the existing political vocabulary of his country and said, I'm not using it, right? And I sense in the students a very strong instinct and that might turn out to be an extremely shrewd political judgment. And on that note, thank you all for coming. And